Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is an action comedy film based on the graphic novel series Scott Pilgrim by Brian Lee O'Malley. The film is set in the life of Scott Pilgrim, a young slacker and bass guitarist in the band Sex Bob-omb, as he falls for the mysterious and alluring Ramona Flowers. The film begins in Toronto, Ontario, with Scott Pilgrim hanging out with his bandmates, who are part of a local rock and roll band named Sex Bob-omb. Among his bandmates are Kim Pine, the drummer who used to date Scott in high school, Stephen Stills, known as The Talent, and young Neil, who frequently spends time with the band. Scott excitedly introduces his new girlfriend, Knives Chow, a 17-year-old high schooler who is 5 years younger than him. He finds comfort in their simple relationship. Knives joins the band during their practice session, and she watches in admiration, quickly becoming their most devoted fan. After the rehearsal, Scott went home and informs his gay roommate, Wallace Wells, that he wishes to address any potential rumors beforehand. He admits to dating a high school girl and asks Wallace to keep this information confidential. Shortly after, Scott's sister Stacy calls, reprimanding him for being involved with a high school girl, a revelation she got from Wallace. On the following day, Scott picks up Knives from school and they head to the arcade. While playing, he shares quirky facts about Pac-Man. They further explore places like the Goodwill store and the record shop. Scott walks home with Knives, enjoying the attention she showers him with. Knives confides in Scott, admitting that she's never experienced a kiss with a boy. In response, Scott reveals that he too has never been in such a situation. They arrive at his place, but Scott hesitates to invite her in, explaining that it's a no girls allowed zone. However, he suggests showing her the house he grew up in. Knives agrees, and they walk a few steps to reach Scott's childhood home, which happens to be just across the street. Later that night, Scott experiences a dream of isolation in a desert landscape. Unexpectedly, a girl with vibrant pink hair glides past him on roller skates, reassuring him that he is merely in a dream. Scott awakens with a start and confides in Wallace, who shares his sleeping quarters, along with Scott, Wallace's partner. On the subsequent day, Scott rendezvous with Knives at the library, his thoughts preoccupied by the enigmatic girl with pink hair, making it hard for him to focus. While making their way to the checkout, he spots her handing over a package and swiftly roller skating off. During their band rehearsal later, Scott remains unfocused, his mind still lingering elsewhere. Stephen delivers positive news that their band has been selected to participate in a Battle of the Bands competition, with their primary contenders being Crash and the Boys. In the evening, they attend Julie Power's house party with the intention of mingling and socializing with individuals from the music industry. However, Scott finds the event dull and decides he'll excuse himself to use the restroom due to his boredom. While there, Scott encounters Como, a well-connected acquaintance who shows him a drawing he created of the girl Scott is intrigued by. Como confirms her identity as Ramona Flowers, revealing that she's expected to be present at the gathering. Scott started searching for her throughout the entire party. Many attendees describe her as someone with a tough and unconventional demeanor, challenging to form a relationship with. Eventually, Scott locates her and attempts to flirt, but his efforts end in failure, prompting him to announce his departure. Seeking insight, Scott turns to Julie and probes about Ramona. Julie discloses that Ramona is American and works at Amazon. Stephen, who previously dated Julie, divulges that she recently ended a relationship with an individual named Gideon in New York, a fact that Julie is upset about Scott knowing. Throughout the remainder of the event, Scott shadows Ramona until she eventually leaves. On the succeeding day, Scott accesses the computer to place an order on Amazon.com with the intention of having Ramona deliver it. Additionally, he receives an email from an individual named Patel, referencing a duel and a group called the League of Evil Exes. Scott dismisses it as uninteresting and promptly deletes the message. He positions himself in front of his door, patiently anticipating the arrival of the recently ordered package. The doorbell rings, but to his surprise, it's Knives who appears. Reluctantly, he spends time with her, though his thoughts remain fixated on Ramona. However, he lacks the bravery to end things with Knives, and during band practice, Stephen informs the group that he has secured a gig for them, a performance that could potentially lead to securing a record contract with a prominent indie label. In another dream, he witnesses Ramona skating past him and proceeds to follow her until she leads him to his own door. Startled awake, Scott rushes to the front door and opens it before Ramona can even ring the bell. Despite his repeated advances, Scott persists in asking her out until she eventually gives in. In defiance of the wintry weather, Scott and Ramona venture outdoors for a date. Seeking refuge from the chill, she invited him to her apartment. There, they engage in passionate kissing, yet Ramona chooses to postpone intimacy for the evening. Scott remains at her place overnight. As morning arrives, Scott extends an invitation to Ramona, urging her to attend the upcoming Battle of the Bands event. At the Battle of the Bands event, Scott spots Ramona arriving. Also present are Wallace, Stacy, and Stacy's boyfriend Jimmy. Wallace spends the entire evening playfully flirting with Jimmy. The situation becomes even more uncomfortable for Scott when Knives arrives, causing everyone's attention to be focused on him. Feeling overwhelmed, he dashes backstage. Crash and the boys deliver an impressive performance, causing Steven to fret over their own set. Taking the stage, Scott and his band start performing, but their act is abruptly interrupted as Matthew Patel crashes into the venue and launches an attack on Scott. A heated confrontation ensues between them. In the midst of the fight, Scott questions Patel's motives, only to learn that he is one of Ramona's 7 exes. Scott realizes he must defeat each of these exes to continue his relationship with Ramona. Scott emerges victorious in the battle, causing Patel to disintegrate into a cascade of coins. Following the ordeal, Scott and Ramona depart on a bus, during which Ramona elaborates that they are now officially a couple. However, she informs him that in order to be with her, he must vanquish all of her remaining evil ex-lovers. With one adversary down, the daunting challenge of facing the remaining 6 lies ahead. Scott informs Wallace of his need to use their place for a date with Ramona later that evening. Wallace consents on the condition that Scott breaks up with Knives immediately. Despite his reluctance due to the difficulty of the task, Scott proceeds to end his relationship with Knives. During their band rehearsal, Scott presents Ramona as his new girlfriend and makes his exit for their upcoming date, leaving Neil to take his place in the rehearsal. While at Scott's place, Wallace heads to the castle, where a movie featuring former professional skater turned action star Lucas Lee is being filmed. Meanwhile, Scott and Ramona are on their date, which initially goes smoothly until their conversation delves into their respective pasts. Scott recounts a painful breakup with a woman named Envy Adams, who left him after her band, Clash at Demon Head, secured a major record deal. They later visit the castle to observe the movie shoot, and to their surprise, they discover that Lucas Lee was one of Ramona's evil exes. Scott finds himself in a brawl with Lucas's stunt doubles, managing to defeat them. However, Lucas proves to be a formidable opponent. In a clever maneuver, Scott challenges Lucas to perform a dangerous skateboard trick on an extended rail. Lucas accepts, but loses control, resulting in his defeat as he crashes and disintegrates. Despite his victory, Scott feels disheartened because he didn't get Lucas's autograph. To his dismay, he realizes that Ramona left without bidding him farewell during the fight. The following day, Scott makes an attempt to contact her, but she doesn't respond. Wallace is supportive of their relationship, hoping that it will lead to Scott moving out and alleviating any guilt about displacing him. In an alleyway, Scott encounters an unexpected assault from a teenage punk girl named Roxy Richter. Scott expresses his lack of interest in the situation, causing Roxy to depart while warning of a potential return. Scott visits the coffee shop where Stacy is employed, intending to have a conversation with her, but discovers she has already departed. Instead, he encounters Ramona, leading to a discussion about their desire to prevent their history from impacting their present connection. Just then, Scott notices Envy positioned behind Ramona. Envy's band, Clash at Demon Head, is scheduled to perform in Toronto later that evening, and she invites Scott, along with his friends including Ramona, to join the show. During the concert, a surprising revelation occurs. Todd Ingram, the bassist, is revealed to be yet another one of Ramona's evil exes. Knives is now in a relationship with Neil, a decision driven by her desire to remain close to Scott, but becomes envious and agitated upon noticing Scott's newfound relationship with Ramona. After the show, Envy extends an invitation for them all to join her backstage, resulting in an awkward gathering. In this setting, Knives adopts an overly enthusiastic fan persona, leading to a confrontation where Todd physically assaults her. Scott immediately leaps into action, aiming to defend Knives, but Todd's psychic abilities halt Scott midair. These powers stem from Todd's adherence to veganism and his attendance at the Vegan Academy. A battle ensues between Scott and Todd, but Scott finds it's hopeless as he is unable to defeat Todd. In a bold move, Scott challenges Todd to a base duel. Surprisingly, Todd emerges victorious, sending Scott crashing into an adjacent room. However, Scott seizes an unexpected opportunity by offering Todd coffee laced with soy milk, which unbeknownst to Todd, contains actual milk. This deceit causes Todd to lose his vegan abilities. At a crucial juncture, the vegan police make a dramatic entrance, and they administer punishment to Todd for his dietary transgressions. The punishment results in Todd disintegrating into a cascade of coins. Following this event, Scott offers an apology to Envy and departs the scene alongside Ramona. Scott and Ramona make their way to the after party for Clash at the Demon Heads. Scott's mood is soured as he reflects on the recurring threat posed by Ramona's vengeful exes, who consistently attempt to harm him. The weight of Ramona's tumultuous history with her exes leaves Scott feeling uneasy and insecure. Unexpectedly, Roxy reappears and delivers a forceful blow to the back of Scott's head, establishing herself as yet another member of Ramona's sinister exes. It comes to light that Ramona had once explored a brief period of being romantically involved with women. In a bold move, Ramona takes it upon herself to protect Scott by revealing a massive sledgehammer concealed within her purse. This leads to a fierce clash between Ramona and Roxy. During the confrontation, Roxy reveals that, as per a set of unwritten rules, Scott must be the one to engage in combat against her for it to be considered a valid confrontation. However, Scott adamantly refuses to engage in a physical fight with a woman. Ramona, resourceful as ever, seizes the opportunity to wield Scott's body as a proxy in the battle against Roxy. Together, they manage to overcome her. The cumulative toll of facing Ramona's exes takes a toll on Scott, leaving him disheartened and contemplating whether he should continue his relationship with Ramona. Sensing his inner turmoil, Ramona hands Scott a list detailing the remaining evil exes he must confront. Following this revelation, Ramona bids him farewell and departs, leaving Scott to grapple with his emotions and the challenges that lie ahead. During the band's meeting, they convene to strategize their approach for securing victory in the upcoming battle of the band's competition. Their opponents are the twins Katayangai, whom Ramona had been involved with in the past. The discussion revolves around devising a plan to outperform their rivals on stage. At the concert, an epic clash ensues between the two bands as Ramona observes from the audience alongside Gideon Graves. The musical duel escalates into a spectacle, with both bands transforming into colossal electric monsters that engage in a fierce showdown. Ultimately, Sex Bob-omb emerges triumphant, overcoming the challenge posed by the fifth and sixth evil exes. Amidst the excitement, Scott manages to seize an extra life power-up that materializes above him, bolstering his resolve. After the event, outside the venue, Scott makes an earnest attempt to reconcile with Ramona. However, she has already made up her mind and chooses to reunite with Gideon. Gideon, who expresses admiration for the band's performance, proposes a record deal, but Scott staunchly refuses to sign with him. Nevertheless, the remaining members of the band opt to accept the offer, with young Neil stepping in to fill Scott's bassist role. Scott finds himself immersed in a pool of self-desolation, but it's Wallace who encourages him to rise above it and advocate for his love for Ramona. Empowered by Wallace's words, Scott ventures to a concealed nightclub where Gideon is situated and where Sex Bob-omb is performing. Upon arrival, Scott boldly declares his intention to confront Gideon and fight for Ramona's affection, driven by his profound feelings for her. Harnessing the force of love, Scott undergoes a transformation, summoning a colossal flaming sword from within his own chest. He engages in combat against Gideon's henchmen before facing Gideon himself. In a twist of fate, Knives makes an entrance, intervening to save Scott from Gideon's clutches. However, the situation takes a dramatic turn as Knives, fueled by her heartbreak, challenges Ramona due to Scott's emotional turmoil. As a confrontation between Knives and Ramona begins, Scott takes a pivotal step and intervenes, halting their battle. He candidly confesses to his past transgressions, revealing his infidelity with Ramona while he was still with Knives. Despite this revelation, Scott asserts that he doesn't perceive himself as having cheated on Ramona with Knives. The climax intensifies as Gideon seizes an opportunity, thrusting a blade into Scott's back, resulting in his demise. Scott finds himself transported to a desolate desert landscape, isolated and lifeless. Ramona stands beside him, and they engage in a conversation about his newfound insights and the true motivation behind his battles. During their exchange, Scott utilizes the extra life he acquired, propelling him back to the initial point of the scene. Determined, he strides back into the scenario, reliving the sequence of events leading up to Gideon's challenge. As the confrontation escalates once more, Gideon eventually inquires about Scott's motivation for the fight. In contrast to the previous encounter, this time Scott responds with himself. This affirmation grants him the power of self-respect, enabling him to extract yet another formidable sword from his chest. Armed with newfound strength, he propels himself at Gideon, emerging victorious after a fierce clash. Amidst the aftermath, Scott calls out for Knives, and she leaps into the scene, delivering a powerful kick to Ramona's head. Scott intervenes swiftly, halting Knives' attack. He assumes responsibility by admitting to his unfaithfulness to both women. Gideon re-emerges, undeterred, prompting Knives and Scott to join forces against him. Through their combined might, they manage to overcome Gideon, leading to his dissolution into a multitude of 7 million coins. Right before they depart, Nega Scott, an evil version of Scott, arrives. He instructs Ramona and Knives to wait outside, as he needs to face Nega Scott alone. Outside, Ramona and Knives remain patient. Eventually, the door opens, and both Scotts exit, engaged in laughter and conversation. Scott reveals that Nega Scott is actually a nice person, and they plan to meet up for brunch the following week. Ramona decides to leave, expressing her desire not to turn him into another evil ex. Turning his attention to Knives, Scott looks for guidance, but she encourages him to chase after Ramona, acknowledging her pivotal role in his journey. Scott catches up to Ramona, and they reconcile their relationship. The final scene depicts Scott and Ramona stepping through a subspace door while the camera shifts upward into the sky, and the movie concludes here. Thank you for watching, and I highly recommend watching the entire movie as it is incredibly enjoyable. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing to our channel, so you can stay updated and receive notifications whenever we upload new videos.